client and respecting their historical characters. As an active volunteer, Allyson chairs the Near West Side Partners, vice chairs of City of Milwaukee Planning Commission, and is a board member of Milwaukee Chamber Theater. She also teaches as an adjunct professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I think we met, yeah. Leading her students through the masonry. Students are awesome. None of my students came. Allyson is driven to create and serve thriving communities, rejuvenate underutilized historical buildings, educate the next generation of designers, and secure life-sustaining shelter for others. Please join me in welcoming Allyson.
Good afternoon. No pressure being number 8, right? I mean,
Number 8.
number 8. Here we go. When Dan and I, when Matt and I originally talked, and Dan, who's following after me, we discussed that that Quorum is primarily an urban revitalization firm, and a lot of the goals of the conference were really to address smaller town theaters. And then we kind of started to dig deeper. Although a lot of the work that we've done has been within the city of Milwaukee, it's in the ring corridors. It's in sort of some of the underdeveloped or redeveloping, depending on how you want to look at it, commercial ring corridors outside the city center. So a lot of the aspects of the work that we've done in theater revitalization is very similar to the challenges that smaller towns and other areas face. And a lot of this, I'm going to be pulling together things that you've already heard over the last couple of days, because we overlap with some of these. So a shout out to Donna on this next one, the Tower Theater. One of our longest relationships is with the Tower Theater on 27th and Wells in the near west side of Milwaukee. It's a large urban movie palace and former vaudeville house. As it fell into use, it was encompassed into the adjacent hospital space. The rake floor was, as Donna said, was flattened, and the theater space was used as the hospital's cafeteria. The hospital was most recently used as city campus, which was Milwaukee County's office space, and then it was about 5 years ago, a developer that Donna and I work with purchased the theater and the adjacent the city campus in its entirety and the adjacent Wisconsin Avenue School to reuse as an extended stay hotel and event space. So we're kind of doing this in baby steps. You know, you saw the lovely historic marquee that I know we'd love to recreate. So we're working towards that. But just making the building viable in the short term in order to do small facade renovations that are consistent with the original plan, and then improving, you know, small details of it that can go forward to revitalizing the overall street presence of the building. As I mentioned, we're working with Donna and Preserve on the restoration, and this is all, you know, hopefully an interim use to bring this back. But yeah, when is that going to be? When is that going to be viable? Will it ever be? But we do have, because of Donna and Preserve's work, a lot of the historic theaters groups, quite a bit of the recognizance necessary, as Donna mentioned, already putting the stair back together. So this is how it fits within the overall campus. The school on the right, the hospital on the left, and the Tower Theater there in the middle. Another one of these smaller commercial corridor theater projects that we've been involved with has been the Sherman Theater, where we proposed a reuse, and we were working with pre-pandemic to reuse this theater on Burleigh in Milwaukee's Sherman Park neighborhood. Here's what the theater looked like when we became involved. The owners wished to reuse this theater as an arts incubator. Always the first step is to find a compatible use. The theater would be a theater, always a good first step. The offices and commercial retail spaces would be small art classrooms for neighborhood arts groups to use as their home base. Here's a rendering of our proposed reuse, where many of the character exterior detailing, including the marquee, would be revitalized. The State Street Theater has become a love affair for our firm. Jessica's still here. Elena was here yesterday. Some of you might have gotten to meet them. And it's kind of a wanky story in itself. It was originally a local movie and performance house. It's only 3 blocks from the much larger and grander Tower Theater on 27th and State in Milwaukee. It progressed from a movie house to a dance hall known as the Electric Ballroom, and then it was the Palms. So anybody shout out for any of those uses? I'm not going to ask about the next use. Was after the Palms it became Hoops, which was a strip club, so we kind of exclude that from our period of significance. Although a lot of the character defining features of that are still there. This shows the second full facade on this building. You'll see sort of our attempt to take it back to an earlier time because of some events that have happened. When we inherited this building, none of this was here. So this is only from photograph. My favorite line, I don't know if everybody can read it, but sometimes a woman has to lie to a man. I just love that. Not sure if that was a movie, not exactly sure. So the marquee is totally different than when it was originally built. The whole front was, the facade was granite, and it had this backlit marquee. This is probably not a positive architectural time after that last photograph, but actually maybe my favorite phase in the State Street Theater's development. It was the Palms. I don't have internet service here, so when preparing my remarks, I couldn't Google the list that we have on the back of our t-shirts that say all the bands that performed there as they were developing to be something. Who did you guys see there? I know Psychedelic Furs, that's the one that always comes to the top of my mind, but, Talking Heads, yes they were, that's on the shirt. Yep, Blue Oyster Cult, yep, these are all bands that in their infancy came through the Palms, and so this building is significant as a theater, but it's also a cultural icon in the neighborhood. I don't include the Hoops era photos very much. So we'll move on to 2017. There was a homeless person kind of inhabiting the second floor. The building was no longer Hoops. It had fallen into foreclosure, and there was a fire started by a homeless person in the apartment on the second floor. The city then, of course, listed it for demolition, and a group of neighborhood residents, including myself, I live 3 blocks to the west, came forward and said, "But wait, it's just the second floor. We can do this. We can bring this back." And a lot of the preservationists were attaching to the musical history as much as the architectural history, but knew the architectural history had to carry on as the home for the Palms and the history of the Electric Ballroom and to come back. So we found a user, which is always a key step. I think that's come up in some of the fundraising and other parts of this. Westside Arts Unlimited, who wants to operate, who has seen the need and is filling the void, and they're a working nonprofit to not only to create an all ages music venue, but more importantly to teach students of a variety of ages how to record professionally at that higher level that will allow them to go on to success. So a little bit outside the architectural side of this, but they were able to start to put together a development plan to restore and rehabilitate the building. A key ingredient in our ability to rehabilitate this building is to have access to the original drawings and to be able to compare. I don't know if you could see in the fire shots that were a couple slides back, the similarities that are still there that allow us to know that it was built per plan and spec. As we field measure this building, Jessica's nodding, there is that recognizance that it matches up. It's just a happy time. So this is our plan for inserting, like the Tower Theater, this was sloped, the sloped floor, the raked floor was flattened at this point right here. So that's all flat, this is all flat. So it may look like we're not working with the theater, but we are, to allow that volume to go up and above, but have some recording studios on the raised section of floor, even with the street, and then have the performance theater, which will also be used for taping at where the lowered section is right now. These are not the latest interior condition plans. You can see a lot of, and this is the question we are on. It was so great to hear your speech on it. All is not lost, and we can bring it back. And I need to get your information because at certain points, we're from a budgeting and scheduling and detailing perspective. As we start to get into that detail portion of my discussion, questioning, how far to take it back. How much can we afford? How much are we program driven, or are we building preservation driven? And there's, obviously a trade-off and a requirement to do some of it to bring it back. But there is quite a bit of the integrity of this building still in the building. That first floor, unfortunate stucco work is part of the hoops build out, but you can see the ceiling above and some of the theater aspects. Again, part of the shiny curtains are part of the hoops build out, but but you can see that the plaster work remains, and we're starting into the part 2 of the discussion of what we're going to rehabilitate. More of that detailing. It was good to see your befores and your afters. And then here's a detail of bringing back the exterior facade to its earliest point in time, with a simpler marquee, picking up, restoring a lot of the storefront, the signboards, the windows into the second floor, which will now be office and recording studio. The building off to the left isn't part of the project, but the building off to the right now is, and the vacant lot is. So we had a groundbreaking on Monday to start the music park to the east. With COVID, it seemed to make sense to have an outdoor venue first, and that will allow us to have activity on the site. And also, we're starting on the cafe build out just to the east of the theater building proper, which will work hand in glove with the actual theater programming, because it's going to be a live venue with food, but no drink. So all ages again. So we're thrilled to have this project. The mural was unveiled on Monday, and the ground was broken on the music park, and there's work well underway to stabilize the existing cafe building, and that should be coming online next spring. And I believe that's all I have.
Next, we'll have Yoder. Dan always had interest in fine arts. He discovered custom signage and paint. His mentor introduced him to the Letterheads, a gathering of sign painters who taught him many of the old world techniques that now he uses. Since the sign industry has embraced the digital age, hand lettering, gold leafing, neon, and other skills have become harder to find. This kind of craftsmanship is what separates work from the rest. In 2005, Dan founded Sign Art Studio in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. Every sign they create is based on an architectural approach which ensures your signage project is unique to you, your company, and the surrounding landscape. What's not to like, right? So welcome, Dan.
Testing. All right. Is this up or down?
Down.
First of all, I want to thank Matt and his team for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and we'll dig in. So today, I want to talk about the discovery process that we go through. The microphone. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, good. Speak about the discovery process that we go through when we look at some of these types of projects. Are we going to refurbish? Are we going to replicate? And the ordinance. What is the ordinance? How does that impact your project? And then lastly, we'll speak about the Orpheum Theater project. So the discovery process, which is one of the more fun processes for us, is where we get to dig in. We take a look at the sign itself, try to understand the conditions that it's in, electrical, structural, and then research. That is, for me, one of the funnest parts of the project. There's so much you can find that you didn't know. We have another project that we're working on right now where there's an existing set of letters that has a red lens. We did a little more homework, and turns out it has, for us, like between the twinkle bulbs and the red neon outline, and we didn't know this existed. So those are the fun things we get to find out through this research process. So site surveys. This is where we get in, we get dirty, we take a look at the conditions. We're not making decisions on whether we're going to replicate or refurbish. We're just trying to get a baseline, trying to get an understanding of where we're at and where we want to go to. In the case of the Orpheum, this is a sign, we would call it an imposter sign. It wasn't the original. We're looking at the structural integrity, we're getting size, dimensions, that sort of thing. There was no electrical to look at because this was a non-illuminated sign. And we look inside of some of these other projects here, and you can see some of this old wiring, and we know that's something that's going to need to be addressed. It's going to need to be brought up to code. And we're looking at other things in the case of Temple Theater. Yes, Jess and Molly are here from Temple Theater. You know, looking at the conditions, what does the outside look like? Is the metal perforated? Do we have water issues? What's the overall condition? In terms of research, you know, in the case of the Orpheum, we had no color photos to go from. I worked with a gentleman at the Isthmus, which is a publication in Madison. He's a theater buff. He helped out quite a bit. Tried to interview some people from, you know, that may have been around at the time. What color was the sign? So I happened across this Orpheum Theater. I believe it's in Seattle. Another wrap and wrap project. And so for us, that was pretty, cut and dry. Very similar designs. The one on the left is Madison, State Street, Opium. So that was the color scheme we went from. But this is really, for me being a sign nerd and a history nerd, this is where, we have some fun. Refurbish or replicate, and I've heard this brought up many times already today, and I think it's one of the more important decisions, obviously, philosophically, economically. What are we going to do? Are we going to try to keep this? Does it make sense? And the cost implications. For us, when we build new, we know what we're doing. We know what we're getting into. If we want to replicate, like a case like Temple Theater, we kind of went through a cost analysis, and there's just so many unknowns. You don't really know what you're going to get into. So what are the cost implications overall? What's the intention here? I think in a case like, say, Temple Theater, our proposal, and this is ongoing, by the way, so I'm going to apologize. I don't know if we even discussed this. You guys okay with this? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. In a case like that, we determined, from our standpoint, it was best to replicate. And there's many advantages there. We can produce, the replica off-site. They won't have any downtime. The other advantage is you can take that sign down and you can bring it in an interior environment to where it's gonna stay like it is. Viroqua. Yep. So there's other things you can do instead of leaving it outside. It's gonna rot, and there's only so much you can do with some of that old tin. You go through and you'd sandblast all the finish away, and you're gonna find more holes. And so what do you do at that point? The main thing for us we look at is electrical. We're a UL listed sign manufacturer. We have UL standards that we have to adhere to, National Electrical Code. And most of what we find is pretty scary, from a fire standpoint. There's so many different things you can run into. But this is a pretty typical scenario you're going to find on some of these old meter signs. The material is so rotted away, and some of the structural attachment points, and frankly, some of it, we're amazed that they're still up. And you can see, sagging in corners. It's a lot you run into. So, ordinance. Is it compliant? If we take it down, can we put it back up? Are there special permitting processes that are available if it doesn't meet the sign ordinance? I spoke with Jeremy earlier, and he did a thesis on neon signs, which, speaking my love language, of course. And there are communities that are finding value in some of these older signs, and there's actually grant money available. Is it Seattle or Portland? Portland, San Francisco. And they're specific to signage. A lot of these, the grant money kind of leaves that portion alone. We spend a lot of time wanting to preserve historic buildings, and maybe there's a sign with historic relevance, but it's not on a historic building. So what can you do at that point? There's usually no grant money available for that. I have Badger Liquor sign up here. This is on State Street in Madison. This is an iconic sign. It's got, you can barely see it, but there's drips from the beer bottle. And as current ordinance is written, you are not allowed to have flashing or moving signs. So, we were approached by this client to do a refurbishment. We reach out to the city. They say, hey, well, whoa, you can refurbish, but you got to be on site to do it. So we're in further negotiations with the city to try to circumvent that process. But it boils down to, urging our municipal officials to take a look at some of this stuff a little closer. We're going to miss these signs when they're gone. And if we don't try to save them, there's no coming back from that. So in the case of Badger Liquor, it sounds like we've got our zoning official to understand that, hey, we're going to clog up the corner of State Street and Quorum, I think it is. I don't remember the corner there. We're going to put scaffolding up. This is going to be a 2-3 week ordeal. We're going to get in the way of traffic. We're going to, we're going to disrupt. And so then that triggers, hey, maybe it does make sense. Let's let them take this down, refurbish. In the case of the Orpheum Theater, the original sign didn't exist. So they literally used what they called their superpowers, and they just made it happen. And it was the quickest permitting process we've ever experienced. We submit for a standard permit, and we're going to wait 6 weeks, and this was just pushed through. The whole city wanted to see it, so we had a ton of support. But so if you hear a no, don't let that stop you. Sometimes there's ways that you can get around working with, your city officials. And the Capitol Theater is another one that apparently they don't know. It might actually exist somewhere, which would be really, really neat to see. To be determined on that. All right, so I'll just dig in a little bit here on the Orpheum Theater. This will kind of wrap up my portion of this. Obviously for us, I got into this business in 2005. I came from a traditional sign painting, hand carving background, and a one-man shop. Now we're 16 strong. We do a lot of regular new development, commercial stuff. When projects like this come along, it checks all the boxes. It's a true passion project for us. So when it came time to reproduce the design, we did find some old shop drawings. Allyson, you touched on this. Was it as built? No, it wasn't. The shop drawings that the city had on file were, I don't know if they were concept design, but totally different design. So these are the photos that I had to work with. Nothing straight on, I couldn't bring into like a vector program and trace over the top of it. And in the interest of the, being traditional, I did want to lay this out by hand. So sat there at drafting table, laid it out by hand, counted light bulbs, and then we brought it into our vector software, traced over the top of it. So we built a lot of electrical signs. At that time, just nothing of this size. So this was on the left is when we got all the parts back from a water jet cutting, and the time we were like, what in the hell did we get ourselves into? So let me back up real quick here too. So you'll notice these older signs, it's hard to see in this photo. There are two single-sided cabinets on the frame. You'll see a lot of signs that they're double-sided. That's a single cabinet, they're real deep. We wanted this to be period correct, so we also went to two single-sided cabinets. It's a shallower design, a little more hard to service and maintain, but we thought it was appropriate. And we wanted to cut the weight down, so we came up with this kind of rib cage and spine design, which is a little different. We normally do like a framed, aluminum tube frame, and then we skin it. This is all just sheet metal, basically. All hand formed. I forget, I don't know how many thousands of feet of hand formed. We call these returns, all the shapes. Just moving these things around in the shop was a challenge. Our shop at the time was 1,600 square feet. We had to build some things just to move them around. Some of the painting process that we went through, and the wiring of the sign. So this sign has, the border is called a chaser. It's called a 4-bulb chaser, and then it's got, so it kind of looks like it's going all the way up and down. And then the letters are what's called a speller. So it can, different programs you can run where it'll flash each letter at a time, then it'll flash the whole name, which is very traditional. So wiring that was fun, a lot of late nights. And then install day. Honestly, I think I blacked out a little bit because it was a very tense day in a good way. There's big crowds, news crews everywhere. And I'll be honest, we do installs that you would think should be a couple hours that turn into 2 days. We do installs that you think should be a couple days that turn into a couple hours, and this was one of them. We arrived on the job site at 7 a.m. and were broke down and allowed traffic through by 4 p.m. And it was, to say it was a special project is, that's not giving it enough. So, I also won first place in our international Signs of the Times. Signs of the Times is our oldest trade publication. So it's our first place award winner there. And, oh yeah, no specs. I've given you no specs. So 10 foot wide at the top, 55 foot tall overall, 85 foot to the top, about 2,200 pounds each side, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. It really isn't, for what it costs. It was too cheap at the time, I'll tell you that. But no, it's about a $200,000 to $250,000 sign, all in. All your fees, all the install, materials, labor. But this is a big one. Now, the other piece I didn't mention here, there was another $25,000 in structural updates to the existing frame. There were some electrical costs too. Oh, so these are all LED. I think this only draws 12 amps total, which is pretty incredible. Thank you. Some people have it for that? 12 amps, everybody, 12 amps.
What metal is it?
That's aluminum.
The whole thing is aluminum?
Yeah, we built the whole thing out of aluminum. So going back to that, refurbish or replicate, it's difficult, right? Because we have modern materials that weren't available back then. It really depends on what's your intent, from the get-go. We can go old school traditional and do it 100% traditional, whichever way you want to do it.
So the sign's aluminum, the structure inside the sign is aluminum, but you had to connect it to a carbon steel connection.
Correct. Yeah, that's the original frame. You can see it poking out of the top, which was in amazing condition. The sign was put up in 1927. Wrap and wrap, I think I mentioned that. It seems like they must have done all the reviews. And there was about $20,000 worth of updates to the structure, paint job. They put like a stiffener plate along the main back support. So yeah, all this, probably all in was, it's about a $250,000 to $275,000 all-in project. They did get facade grants, and I thought the trust gave them some money too, but yes, okay, yeah, yep, that's right, yep. So, but yeah, that's it. Check out our website, makescience.work.com. So.